Welcome back, everyone, to another Adventure Box podcast day. Hey, this is Zach Edwards with Historical Conquest coming to you, telling you about history in all different ways. So, if you don't know, Mondays and Wednesdays, those are the American history. Right now, we're talking about the American Revolution. Tuesdays and Thursdays, it was ancient Israel. Now we're getting into ancient Mesopotamia. So these are great things to know, great things to put together and learn as we're just having fun. We're not doing this just to fulfill a test or to fulfill an assignment, to do something that school wants us to do. No, we're listening to this because it's fun. It's interesting. There's so much here. Now, if you like wars, if you like battles, now this is great for you. Now, if you don't like battles, you don't really care about wars, strategy, those type of things, but you love politics, great, this is all about it. If you like life, just living life, learning about life, this is a great place for you. I got one more for you. If you like knowing more than others, this is definitely the place. If you want to know more than your teacher knows about history, this is where it is. And you know what? That's not a cop on the teachers. They learn a lot of things about a lot of things. But this is where you can actually learn the information before they do. And you can even help out with asking questions, asking more tentative questions, being part and answering some questions from other classmates. I mean, you're going to be the person that people want to know because you know all the answers. So this is why we're having these get-togethers. And we have a curriculum to go with it. It's quite lengthy. Actually, I didn't pull it out. Let me grab this. So the American Revolution curriculum just came out. Boom. Here it is. Okay. The American Revolution curriculum. It is 400 and what? How many pages? I know we went over. We didn't try to, but we had to go over. So we had so much information here. 413 plus. 417. About 420 pages of everything you can think of from the American Revolution. You're not supposed to read all this. No. Another textbook to read? Ooh, yuck. Actually, if you look, it's not like a regular textbook. I mean, there's large text. It's paragraph style. But it's not just articles about certain things. No, these are stories. These are broadcasts, if there was radios back then. We have all different types of things. We also have activities, lessons to learn, all those type of things. So I got like the Philadelphia campaign and the Battle of Brandywine. So I could learn all about that. But at the same time, I could learn about, let's see, the Declaration of Independence, key passages, and their meanings. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Straight from the Declaration of Independence. I mean, there is everything about anything in here. So, great book to have. You can buy it on Amazon, or you can get our curriculum boxes. These are our curriculum boxes. Comes with crafts, comes with games, things like that. Every month, a new one arrives. This is actually a collection of all the ones that we've already produced, ready to go for the next shipment. Actually, so we got American Revolution, French and Indian War, Colonial Life, Age of Exploration, Israel, Africa, Egypt, Ancient Mesoamerica, the Romans, the Greeks, Mesopotamia. Yeah, we got it all. I mean, this is awesome. There's so much information here, and this is why we're here to share it with you. Today, we're going into the American Revolution. Now, I gave a recap of the French and Indian War Monday, and then I went into a little bit of the overview of what happens with the American Revolution. Now we're going to go into the American Revolution. And I'll just tell you what, when I came out of high school, like you all know, I hated history. When I came out of high school, I had no clue about history. I even took a college class on it, still didn't know anything about history. Why? Because it wasn't fun, it wasn't what I wanted to hear. And it was a lecture from a professor that just wanted to teach the information so we could pass it in a test and had us do book study. That's why we do what we do, because we want to make it fun and exciting for all of you. So, with the American Revolution, let's get in to the Stamp Act first. Okay, so what is the Stamp Act? The Stamp Act was an act put on by Parliament, by the British Parliament. It was a law that was imposed a direct tax on the American colonies. It required that colonists, to purchase specific items, they actually had to have this little stamp, almost like a postage stamp that you see on letters. You know what letters are? You know, the things that you put in the mail and it gets sent from you to somebody else and somebody else to you. Yeah, I know you know what stamps are. But they wanted these stamps to be placed on every item that was sold. Almost like how we get a receipt. But they wanted that stamp right on them to be able to show that you actually paid the taxes on that thing. The reason why is because the British wanted their goods to be sold in the colonies. That's it. So they were making money by monopolizing on the people, making them having to pay for all their goods. If you wanted a Snickers bar, you had to get the Snickers bar with a stamp on it to show that it came from the British. If somebody tried to sell you a Snickers bar without that stamp, it means that they most likely smuggled it in or weren't paying the taxes on it. And if the British found out, you'd be thrown in jail. So that was why the Stamp Act happened. Now this, interesting enough, was actually to pay for the French and Indian War. The British, in their kindness, decided that they were going to take on the French, make sure the French could not take any more land going into the North American area below Canada, because they were giving Canada, the British wanted to have basically the United States, before it was the United States, and be able to go west from there. So the British, like we talked about on Monday, they got the help of the Native Americans. The French did. The British got the help of other Native Americans that were opposing, and they went to war. Now, according to the British, they saved the colonists from a lot of different things. And so the colonists owed them, right? Yeah. So they should have to pay for the war in the colonies. So you would think, okay, so we're being taxed. Well, we're taxed today. Everyone in America is being taxed every day. Even if you're a child, anything that your parents buy or anything that you buy has a tax that's put onto it. Okay, so why is this so controversial? Well, monopoly. So if the U.S. government started making produce or making products, they would make sure that you had to buy it from them instead of your neighbor or instead of your friend, instead of the person in the market down the street. So everything had to be purchased from the British government, made by British citizens in their own companies, such as like the British India West Indian Company. There you go. So here's the question. This Stamp Act. Now I'm going to go back into the curriculum because I'm going to go back to the Stamp Act, actually, the actual chapter on the Stamp Act. Here it is. Okay. So the Boston, nope. See, I got into the massacre. I don't want to get the massacre right yet. Here we go. Stamp Act, Colonial Bills. There we go. Okay. So these were acts that the British were putting on the colonists. Now, there was actually one tax, actually there's a few taxes before the Stamp Act, which was really riling up the people. They did not like the Stamp Act, but they even hated even more what was before it. It was called the Sugar Act. The Sugar Act was basically where the British said that you had to buy British sugar. And so this happened in 1764, where the Stamp Act didn't happen until 1765. So why didn't they stick with this Sugar Act? Too controversial. It was just on one product and the British needed more money. So because of that, they created the Stamp Act. Now, there's actually going to be another one after this. We're going one piece at a time. So March 22nd, 1765, the Stamp Act was passed by the British Parliament. At that point, the people in the Americas, they don't know about it. So they have to take ships from Britain over to the United States, over to the colonies, the 13 colonies, and tell them about it. So they get here, and Virginia, especially, the Virginia House of Burgesses is up in arms. They're like, no way, we're not doing this. They can't force us to do this. We have no representation in Parliament. Everyone else that's taxed by the British have representation there. This is unheard of. Treason! Actually, that was Patrick Henry delivered his famous, "If this be treason, make the most of it" speech. Yeah, that's where he basically contended against the British. Okay, so moving forward, they have the Stamp Act going out, and let's see, the people are starting to get up at arms. There's this group that formed by the name of the Sons of Liberty. It was an underground resistance group against the British. They organized protests, organized boycotts across the colonies. So it's not just in one little spot. They spread it out throughout the colonies. The Sons of Liberty were getting steam. This is about the summer of 1765. The Stamp Act is already in. People are already paying for stuff. All of a sudden, violence starts up. Where? The same place a lot of the violence starts when it comes to the Americas, Boston. So this is Boston as it is today. Interesting thing about this, Boston. So you see how big this landmass is? You know that it was not that big. When, back a long time ago, Boston was basically on an island. You want to see a picture of this? I'll show you a picture of this. Okay, so Boston is basically on an island. I did not bring this up beforehand. I should have. So, and over time, they've actually built it up. Let's see, here we go. Here is Boston. So Boston, if you can look down here, down near the bottom, Boston is basically this big mass. It's almost like it is a peninsula. So this is the Boston Neck as it goes into the city of Boston. So all the major things that are happening in Massachusetts are happening in Boston when it comes to the British. Why? Because of this harbor. The harbor was huge. Now, this long wharf may not have been there. And if it was there, they used it, but they also parked the ships. After they unloaded their goods, they parked their ships out here in the harbor. Why'd they do that? Because they knew that colonists that wanted to rebel could actually take the ships fairly easily if they're attached to the wharf. If they're out here in the harbor, it would have been harder. So, you've got the Sons of Liberty. They're getting heated. They actually start protests in Boston. Now, this is controlled by people such as like Samuel Adams, John Hancock. And these are people that are riling up everyone. So October 7th to the 25th, the Stamp Act Congress meets in New York with delegates from 9 of the colonies. They issue a Declaration of Rights and Grievances, which basically says that only colonial legislatures can tax the colonies and condemns the lack of colonial representation in Parliament. So they basically thumb their nose at the king. Now let me bring over actually a picture of the king. Oops, let me shrink this. I'm actually going to shrink this window a little bit so we can actually see everything that's going on. If I can shrink it. There we go. Shrinking, shrinking, shrinking. There we go. Okay, now let's bring in Mr. King George himself. Now, even back then, King George had a lot of power, a lot more than the monarch has it today. So like Queen Elizabeth, King Charles, they're not much of leadership per se. They're more of a figurehead. They sit in the crown, but they don't actually control the country, much like King George used to control it through Parliament. So he had a lot of power, a lot of sway, and he was the monarch. You couldn't get rid of him. You could get rid of the people in Parliament. You couldn't get rid of him. So he agrees with Parliament to send over the Stamp Act. And this letter, this declaration from the Stamp Act Congress in October from New York, again, it's 9 of the 13 states, so it's 4 that didn't show up. A lot of those 4 are actually friendly with the British. So you had some that were very much against the British, but you also had some states or some colonies that were very for the British, very what we call loyalists. So you had the loyalists and you had the colonists, or some would say the patriots. So the Stamp Act officially, oh, sorry, I was wrong about this. March is not when the Stamp Act actually went into control, not even in May. They had planned it for November 1st. November 1st is when the Stamp Act would actually go in. So no one was paying taxes at this time. But it was the fact that they knew about the Stamp Act that set up the Virginia House of Burgess, the Sons of Liberty, the Stamp Act Congress right before the Stamp Act went into play. Now, why did it take them from somewhere in April, May, when the ships arrived and told everyone about the Stamp Act, until October to actually put together the Stamp Act? Well, remember, there's no mass communications. There's no telephones. In order to tell someone from Massachusetts to New York about something, you actually had to send writers down there to tell them. And then you had to send, and again, there's not cars where you can get from Boston to New York to maybe Washington, D.C. all in one day and meet with people in all three of the states. That was one day. This was horseback. It would probably take you like 4 or 5 days, even a week, to get all the way down to Washington, D.C. Now, try to get from Boston or from New York all the way down to Georgia. Yeah, very difficult. And actually, Georgia, not the Carolinas. That would be very difficult, and it would take you time. Then, after telling everyone, you say, hey, we're going to have the Stamp Act Congress. Come meet us. It's also going to take them time, especially because people are starting to understand about this. People are starting to get mad. Now, when the protests started up with the Sons of Liberty, they didn't just yell and scream and such. No, they went into violent protests in Boston. Now, the reason why I brought up Boston, so here's Boston. Oops, I showed you the picture. King George. Here's Boston. There's Boston as it was at that time. Again, let me span from both of these. Boston, big neck. That's right now. Boston back then, no neck, very little neck. That attached them to the mainland. But as you can see, all this buildup, that's actually where they built out Boston to fill these flats. Okay, so when they found out about the Stamp Act, the next thing that had to happen is, after Parliament passed it, they had to then print the stamps, right? They printed them, of course, in Britain because they wanted the money generation over there. Then they shipped them over, which would take a little while, probably over the summer. Then in August is when violent protests erupted, including burning the officials' houses. Boston officials, their houses were actually burned to the ground. Andrew Oliver, who's a stamp distributor, his house is ransacked and the stamps are destroyed. That came over. So that set them back a little bit. Well, the Parliament didn't exactly like this, of course. No one would. And so it was actually repealed. The Stamp Act was repealed in 1766 because of all the protests. Again, all the things that happened, August, the protests, I remember exactly when the official's house was ransacked and burned, like all the stamps destroyed. But the act went into play November 1st. By March 18th, 4 months later, maybe 5 months later, it was repealed due to economic pressures from British merchants. Why? Because people wouldn't buy anything from the British merchants. If they had a stamp on it, the people didn't want it. They'd find it somewhere else. So because of this colonial boycott, the British merchants said, we can't do this. These stamps are not working. You have to try to figure out something else. So simultaneously, Parliament passed the Declaratory Act. And this affirms its authority to legislate the colonies without representation. Sorry, wow, I need to grab a drink. Usually don't want to drink on screen, but hey, no. Things happen. Okay, so here we go. Let's get into the next part. So there is a legacy that comes with this. So the Stamp Act didn't work. The Sugar Act wasn't enough. So what was next? This next thing was even worse. The next thing was called the Townshend Act. and this is actually passed by Townsend himself. Townsend was actually I've got it right here. Townsend Act. I'll go through Townsend's life there. But somewhere in here, there's Townsend. Here we go. Okay, so in Parliament, there is someone by the name of William Pitt the Elder. He's the former Prime Minister, and he's the one that he was one of the most outspoken critics of the Stamp Act before it went into play. So he actually did not believe in it, and he was actually one that believed that they shouldn't tax the people without representing the people. So there's a good section here to read about him, William Pitt the Elder. Look it up. But I'm looking for Townsend. In each of these, you'll actually find a part in here where it talks about the people, the most influential people. And actually, we don't have it in this one. Too bad. Because Townsend was actually an interesting person to learn about. You need to look it up yourself. There's a lot more to him. Actually, I can't, with all these things that are going on, I can't exactly remember his specific story. But he is actually the reasoning for a lot of these acts. So the Townsend Act is passed by Congress 1767, June 29th. So 1767, remember the Stamp Act was actually repealed in 1766. So it took them a whole another year to actually come up with a new tax. Okay, so the Townsend Act goes in, and what did it do? It included where the Revenue Act, included the Revenue Act, the Commissioners of Custom Act, which means you had commissioners there that would actually, it gave them more power to do customs of anything that was coming into places like Boston Harbor and such. And they created a new board, a customs board. It's established in Boston, again, because of all the violence that's happening in Boston, which they're supposed to enforce the taxation of people. So, the Townsend Act, let's go through some of these. The Townsend Act imposed duties on several key goods that are imported into the colonies, including glass. So every house that had glass, you had to pay a stamp on it. Lead. What does lead make? Oh, wait a second. That makes all the ammunition, the cannonballs, those are all lead. So bullets and those type of things. Paint. If you're going to paint your house, which you need to paint your house, even whitewashing is still painting your house, because it's near the salt water, it will degrade quickly. Paper. Who doesn't need a little bit of paper? Sorry, during this time, printing press, those are all stamped. All that paper stamped, or not stamped, taxed. If you're going to send out pamphlets protesting these acts, stamped. All these things, not stamped, taxed. Yes, they are taxed. And so that is why the Townsend Act was so burdensome. It wasn't just one thing, it was everything was basically being taxed. And the big one, which would change over time, tea. Now, if you're British, you drink tea. If you're French, you drank tea. Everyone in the colonies basically drank tea. So all of a sudden, sorry guys, you can't do anything unless you get taxed. And so they did the Townsend Act. The intent was, again, a practical way of raising funds while asserting their rights to tax the colonists by targeting import goods rather than internal purchases. So anything that was being shipped in. Now, you would say, well, wouldn't the merchants be mad? Well, the merchants would be basically putting those taxes on the people. Now, interesting enough, this is exactly what happens when Congress or the president tries to put a tax on anything. Even if they put it on the manufacturers, it always runs down to the people that buy, the customers. If they put a tax on it, you're going to pay the taxes in the end. I'll give you a good example. Okay, so someone buys, what's a regular widget that people buy? Okay, let's do a candy bar again. Okay, So there's many manufacturers when it comes to candy bars. So the nut provider, taxed. Chocolate provider, taxed. Caramel provider, or all other innards provider, taxed. Okay. Wrapper provider, taxed. Okay. So in the United States right now, if there's a tax put on any of these corporations, these companies, the candy bar, to make the candy bar, it becomes more expensive. Let's just say a candy bar to manufacture costs 50 cents. Well, let's go even better. 20 cents. Okay. Then the candy bar, with just the candy bar itself, has to be wrapped. Let's add on another 5 cents. Okay. Now, if you're going to get that candy bar to a distributor, you're going to ship it to them, right? Add another 5 cents. So you're up to 30 cents on a candy bar. Now, that distributor has to make some money. Otherwise, they wouldn't be collecting all these goods and distributing them to other stores. So they add on about another 10 cents. So now you're up to 40 cents per candy bar to produce, to bring it to the shelves of the supermarket. Now, wait a second, but we're not at the supermarket yet. We're still at the warehouse. Okay, so transport them from the warehouse to the store. Another 5 cents, 45 cents. Now, that grocery store, in order to stay in business and pay for all the people that are working there, just like the warehouse had to do, they have to charge it. Now, let's go back to the warehouse. I said 10 cents, but now, wait a second. They just were made to pay their workers an extra $1 per hour. Another 5 cents on each of those candy bars. What? It's not that expensive. Well, you have to pay for the person's salary. You have to pay for payroll taxes, because when the person's salary goes up, they have more money to go, because a percentage of that money from their side goes to payroll. But the company themselves has to pay as well. So their 10 cents now went up to 15 cents. And if they had to change their wages, then most likely the drivers of the goods had to be increased as well. So theirs would go up, but we're just going to make 15 cents. We're now up to 50 cents, and it is just getting to that 20-cent candy bar. It took 20 cents to make it. It now is at the grocery store, and the grocery store has to make money. So they tax it, literally everything. Not that they tax it. They basically increase the price by 2 to 3%. Let's just say 3% to actually give them a reasonable amount of money to be able to make off of that candy bar. Okay, so they get 3% up. 3% of 50 cents is about $1.50. Okay, so they have 3% on that candy bar. So it's about, not $1.50, sorry, 15 cents. So now, oh, not 15 cents, 1.5 cents. Okay, so 1.5 cents they put on top of that candy bar. All of a sudden, that candy bar is more expensive. And it continues until it's sold to you, where it comes out to probably about 60 cents. For 20 cents, it comes to 60 cents. And then you get the candy bar. Well, what happens? All of a sudden, all of those go up. Let's just say inflation goes up. That candy bar is now 40 cents to make, because over the last 4 years, everything's gone up. Inflation's gone up drastically. It went up to 9%, even up to 11% in some industries. Okay, so let's just say that, and that was just in 1 year. It's over 4 years. So it's almost 50% that it's gone up over 4 years. So now your candy bar cost, I said 20 cents, now it's 30 cents. But every single one of those people are now having to increase their price because of inflation. Gas went up. The gas price went up. So the transportation goes up. All these things go up. All of a sudden, the government says, hey, we're going to put a tax on you of 50%. What? That's what the British were doing. What? It already costs us too much to buy tea from you, and now you're taxing us more? Well, the manufacturers were the ones that were taxed on it, so they're putting the price of it on you, the consumer. What are you going to do? Well, you could smuggle it, and if you're caught, you'd be sent to jail, and everything would be taken from you. Or you pay the tax. Now, the British, that's what they were thinking. The colonists, they had different ideas. They're like, well, no, no, no. If you're going to do this, we're going to go up in arms. We're going to stop you by attacking you or other things. So what was next to happen? Well, this is when you all of a sudden have what's called the Boston Massacre. Now, there's a lot more to the Boston Massacre than we're going to be able to go over, and there's a lot more than people actually like present it to be. So, March 5th was the Boston Massacre. This is actually when a small group of British soldiers were surrounded by an angry mob outside of the customs home. But what happened before that? Why were they so upset? Was it because of taxation? No. Now, some of them were there because of taxation, but no, that's not why they were mad. They were actually mad because one of the colonists' young children was actually abused by the custom house by one of the custom officers. And I'm not going to go into the whole story. Read it in the book. It's there. And so, for this reason, the soldiers were there protecting the customs house, again, because the Sons of Liberty had been attacking some of the customs houses, some of the taxers, all these things. So, they were very much at arms. The mob was very upset. And so, amid the escalation, a soldier opened fires. And then 5 opened fire. And they kill, or sorry, not 5. The whole group opened fire on this angry mob. It kills 5 people and wounds several others. But one person that it kills is actually the first African American or African colonist, free African colonist, who's killed. By the name of Crispus. I can't remember his first name. It's in the book. But because of this, the Boston Massacre becomes a thing. And how does it become a thing? Well, a man by the name of Paul Revere engraves this. He's an engraver. He engraves this in metal and sends this out. Basically, it's printed on metal. It's engraved on a printing plate, and it's printed, and it goes out everywhere. So Paul Revere actually did not make the drawing itself. I think his name was Doolittle. He printed it. Paul Revere engraved it so it could be published, which basically showed the British attacking the unarmed colonists. This was the first part of like propaganda in the Americas, in the colonies. Actually, there's probably plenty of it, but this is one of the major ones. So because this is called propaganda because it wasn't telling the whole story. The British were the ones being attacked, things being thrown at them, and the British shot at them. But this also introduces the trial of the British soldiers. Now, who would defend them? Nobody would defend them. In the end, John Adams is the one that defended them. John Adams, yeah, you know him, the second president of the United States, a colonist, a patriot. He defended them because he believed in the Americas, everyone, U.S. citizen or non-U.S. citizen, deserved a good trial and needed to be represented. Unlike the British, who didn't want representation, he was going to represent the British because it was the right thing to do. On December 6th, 6 of the soldiers were acquitted. They didn't have any evidence of their intent to kill. 2 soldiers were found guilty of manslaughter and branded on their thumbs as punishment. Like, well, that's not bad. Well, try being in Boston with the brand and people see that brand. Well, you're either going to, 1, try to hide it, or 2, try to be sent back to Britain where you're not going to be persecuted for that brand. Okay, so there's a lot more that happens, including the Tea Party. But I've run out of time, so we're going to push this off to the next one. And we're going to do the Tea Party and the Battle of Lexington and Concord at that time. So stay tuned for Monday. Thank you so much for being with us. I know it's Friday because we had to push it off because we were finishing up our big grant. We have so much more to come. So stay tuned. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great day. Bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.